Yeah, that's a much better way of making the spiced coffee. So, I'm doing my video outside today, and you might notice that there are wood chips all over my front yard. I was hoping to do a whole video just talking about why I have wood chips in my front yard, and you know, it takes a long time. We've gotten 2 gigantic loads of wood chips dropped off in our front yard, and it takes hours to get them all spread out. But with what we have planned, it'll be worth it. And I wanted to kind of do a garden video where I was going to show what kind of preparations we were making for our yard and for our garden. Unfortunately, there's some work going on in the backyard where we'd be spending most of the time, and I just wouldn't be able to talk over all the noise going on back there. So we're going to talk about some other stuff. Here's what's left of the pile of wood chips. We're just trying to get it all spread out. One thing I wanted to mention, if you're in Texas, I'm talking about this garden stuff, and I mentioned that eventually this channel will be maybe a little bit more like a homesteading channel, because we'll be doing a lot of different stuff, along with cooking, woodworking, some gardening, keeping chickens, hopefully a lot of different animals in the future. Anyway, so I'm going to the Mother Earth News Fair in Belton, Texas, coming up February 15th and 16th. And basically it seems to be a big homesteading fair. I've never been before, but they have a lot of really cool resources and a lot of cool booths and stuff that hopefully will help me and my family kind of get started on raising chickens and animals and growing our own food. And so I'm pretty excited about that. I would love to hear it if any of you guys are planning on going. It might be fun to just hang out there or something. Anyway, so I want to mention that, but since the video I was going to film didn't work out, I won't be able to go to the backyard, go into depth on gardening stuff. So we'll do that in the future. But for today, just to kind of give a little bit more, make this not as much of an update video, I did want to talk about something. So my family and I have been in the habit of going to get some raw milk at a dairy near us. It's about a 40-minute drive, and last week we were listening to Mumford Sons, and the song Little Lion Man, we were listening to that song, and my wife and I just kind of talked about it a little bit, what we thought the lyrics were about. It was a really good discussion, and I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you, and some advice on manhood and marriage especially that I kind of gathered from that and we talked about. So there are only 2 verses in that song. I've always been a huge fan of Mumford & Sons. I actually don't listen to a whole lot of music anymore. I used to listen to music all the time. I don't listen to quite as much as I used to. And Mumford & Sons, if I do listen, a lot of times I go to them. I like the depth of their lyrics. They talk about real substantial stuff, and not a lot of music talks about substantial things anymore. I remember I used to love that song Little Lion Man. If you've heard it, it's maybe their most passionate song. Just so full of passion, and you can just feel like almost an overwhelming sense of something trying to come out when they're singing it. And I've always liked it for that. I've always gotten really into it. But honestly, I had no idea what it was about. I mean, you can kind of make guesses, but I had no idea what it was about until I got married, and I understand it so much more now. And I don't know for sure what his intentions were, whoever wrote the lyrics. I definitely feel like it matches, it's kind of become my anthem in marriage. It kind of become the song that sticks out to me as, unfortunately, what the role that I play a lot of times in my marriage. And the first verse is, weep for yourself, my man, you'll never be what is in your heart. Weep, little lion man, you're not as brave as you were at the start. Rate yourself and rake yourself, take all the courage you have left. Wasted it on fixing all the problems that you made in your own head. And actually my wife had a lot of insight on that first part. She actually kind of surprised me, because she mentioned, she imagined that that's a struggle that a lot of men have, realizing that you're not as brave as you thought you were, that you're not as courageous as you thought you were, and realizing like every time you fall, every time you kind of cringe in fear and you hold back from something, just realizing, and that realization that you're not that lion of a man that you thought you were, just kind of like breaks at you and kind of breaks you down. But I think especially in marriage that's the case. Marriage is, I mean, it's hard. There's so many more tests of patience, of courage, of bravery than you might think. And it's amazing at how many times I just find myself not being up to it and not standing up to it, and wanting to be, and then just feeling so inadequate. And especially that you're not as brave as you were at the start. Man, I remember going into marriage feeling like I'm gonna be an amazing husband. I had all these ideas. I was young. I mean, I'm still young, but I was a lot younger, and I just had this idea of who I was and like how strong of a person I was. But the problem was I had never truly been tested. I mean, college was hard. Of course there are things within my life that were difficult, but nothing like marriage. Marriage is like it's a test of fire that strengthens you, and it melts away all the selfishness and all the waste, all the stuff that you want to get rid of. At least if you believe that the world is not perfect and that you're part of the problem, there's a lot of things that need to be eaten up and burned away in marriage. Like monasticism are both ways that are meant to do that. They're meant to kind of break away what doesn't need to be there, but that's a hard process, and it's difficult, and you kind of cling to it and you run away from that sometimes. And anyway, before marriage, I'd never really been tested, and my courage had never been tested like it is now. And I had this idea about how brave I was, and then of course throughout the course of the marriage found, man, I'm a coward, and there's a lot of shame in that. But because I have hope and I have faith that God can change me, then I'm not going to give up. I believe that God is going to work in me through the church, and through the means of grace that He's given us, that He can make me. But it's an overwhelming prospect, and I have to summon up that courage. But man, the rest of the song I feel like really focuses in on how men, and I'll just talk about myself, how I overcompensate for that lack of bravery and that lack of courage. Sometimes it gets bottled up, and I miss all these opportunities to truly be brave. And then sometimes I find an opportunity to not necessarily be brave, but to be bold, and to put my foot down when it's inappropriate, and to just kind of explode in the relationship, and be, a nice way of putting it would be, less than kind to my wife. And if you let it, you can always, you can see these things in your spouse that you rightfully don't want to see in them, because maybe they are sin, maybe they are a problem. But one thing orthodoxy has taught me is, if I understand that I'm part of the problem, my vision and my understanding of things is also wrong. It's problematic. It's out of whack. And so, sometimes I'll see things and I'm like, oh, that needs to be fixed now. Like, there's a problem, with my wife. She shouldn't act this way. She shouldn't treat me this way. And maybe she shouldn't. But I think I've got to fix this right now. And I'm not thinking about all the things that I need to be fixing. That last line says, "Take all the courage you have left, spend it on fixing all the problems that you made in your own head." And I get that because I make up all these problems in my head, and I make up that, like, this is how serious they are, this is how quickly they need to be addressed. And then the next verse actually opens that up a little bit more. It says, "Tremble for yourself, my man, you have seen this all before. Tremble, little lion man, you'll never settle any of your scores. Your grace is wasted in your face, your boldness stands alone among the wreck. Now learn from your mother, or else spend your days biting your own neck." Man, you'll never settle in any of your scores part, that part really hits me hard, because I feel that all the time. All those problems that I make in my own head. I'm seeing all these problems, and I'm making mountains out of molehills, and I'm building those things up, and I'm setting up all these scores that I need to settle. And then that leads to this moment of boldness. Your boldness stands alone among the wreck. I get bold and I try to settle that score, and then it's like. The intensity of that problem, or whatever I thought was wrong, or whatever score I thought I needed to settle, it just dissolves when you say it out loud, and when you start having an argument and you realize, oh, there's another perspective here, and then you have to fight against that perspective, and you think, I shouldn't have to, I know I'm right in this, I shouldn't have to justify myself for feeling this way. You just build all this stuff, and then it all crumbles down, and you see it for what it really was. It's a wreck. Your boldness, you built up all this infrastructure, to prove to yourself, how good you were and how wrong you were being. And then you finally have your moment of boldness, and you put it out there, and then it all crumbles back down, and you realize you're amongst the wreckage, and all you have is that, oh, I had that great moment of boldness, and it's just it was worth nothing. And then it says your grace was wasted in your face. I also feel that because on the same at the same time of holding on to those wrongs and trying to settle those scores, I'm also thinking about all the nice things I'm doing, and this is how I'm being such a good husband, and I'm just kind of building up my good things. And then of course you have that moment of boldness, and you put yourself out there, and then you realize how wrong you were and how impatient and selfish you were actually being, and then all that grace that you thought you had been bestowing just like turns also into ash. Jesus says that when you're invited to someone's house, don't take the place of honor. Take the place of take the humble seat, because it would be better for the host to come in and say, no, you need to sit up here to elevate you, than it is to sit at the place of honor and be humbled and to have to go down. If you humble yourself, then you set up the stage to have to be humbled less often. And most of the times, even the sins that we can't seem to get rid of, I've talked about this before, but even the sins that we can't seem to get rid of, that just hold on to it, we're like, God, don't you want me to stop sinning? Don't you want me to stop doing this? Why won't you help me? Well, the fact is, maybe if he were to make it to where you never committed that sin again, it would just bring up your pride. So you have to address your pride, first and foremost. You have to humble yourself so that you don't have to be humbled. And that's a hard thing, but it always has, no matter what sins that you're trying to focus on in your marriage or in any relationship, or just maybe sins that only you know about, that always has to be side by side with humility, and you have to humble yourself. Whenever you take the place of boldness, the place of correction, the place of, I'm gonna fix this outside problem that's not within myself. You put yourself in this seat of pride, this throne, you're going to be humbled. You're going to be, sitting amongst the wreckage of your, own boldness and mistakes. The chorus is also really powerful, because it's basically just this great apology. It was my fault. It wasn't your fault. I really messed this up. Just as a warning, it does have explicit language, and I go back and forth on that. To some extent, I do think that there should be, that our culture is supposed to always have words that are untouchable, because it kind of creates that ceiling, and it's not a fake ceiling of anyway, maybe I'll talk about that some other time. I think that there have to be untouchable words, but I also think that if you ever were to use the F word in a song when you're talking about fighting your own demons and how much you mess something up, I think maybe that would be the most appropriate time. So maybe it's the most appropriate usage that I've ever heard of that word being used. But anyway, it is in there. I don't want anyone to be surprised. If you haven't listened to that song, it might be worth listening to, especially if you're a husband, especially if you have that constant inner struggle of just how you're treating your wife and your relationship, that constant elevating yourself and then being humbled. If you know what I'm talking about, this might be your anthem, and just gathering the passion of his humility, the passion of the passion behind feeling the weight of your own sins. I just think it's a pretty good example of that. Yeah, I'd love to hear your comments. If you guys, the more you guys are interacting in the comments or asking questions, the more I would love to interact with you guys, not just in the comment section, but maybe you'll bring up something that I hadn't thought about. We'll talk about it. Click like and subscribe. Obviously, you probably already know that helps me out. Sign up for the email list. I'll put the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.